Nurse coaching isn't just a job. It's a person. It's who we become and how we live our lives. And you're bringing that into your organization. And all of a sudden, people are acting differently. Like they're responding differently because the vibe is different. The culture begins to shift. Things begin to change.
Hey, nurses and nurse coaches, welcome back to the Nurse Coach Collective podcast. Heather here, and today joining me is my friend, my colleague, nurse coach Amanda Johnsen. Amanda, welcome.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yes, me too. All right, well, let me tell you all a bit about Amanda. Board-certified nurse coach Amanda Johnsen is on a mission to blend her nursing experience, her leadership training, and coaching skills to reignite the flames of healthcare. From powerful webinars to personalized one-on-one coaching, dynamic group sessions, and orchestrating transformative retreats, Amanda's energized and holistic approach helps to uncover hidden potential so her clients can unlock the success they crave in their lives. Amanda has a huge heart for the healthcare system and is passionate about helping others to use nurse coaching, getting into positions, programs, and making proposals inside of their organizations to have an impact exactly where they are. Amanda, it is such an honor to have you here with me today.
Wow, it's such an honor to be here. What an amazing introduction, and just goes to speak to just the power of nurse coaching. And so I love to talk about it anywhere I can. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, well, you are a special guest because when I say that you are my friend and my colleague, I mean that. And I know that as nurse coach colleagues, we've both had the opportunity not only to do our own individual work in our practices, but also supporting a lot of other nurse coaches in their practices. So I think you're going to be able to really provide just a ton of value, not only from your own perspective, but from what you've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of other nurse coaches do in their lives and practices.
Yeah. I always love to say that as much as you can dream, do it. Because as a nurse coach, whatever you dream, you can come to fruition. And I have seen this in anything you can possibly imagine. And so I love to help nurse coaches bring out that dream inside of them so that they can unlock this power that's just kind of been stuck in them, and give them that permission to think a little different, think outside of the box, and then see how they transform not only their life, but the ripple effect they have to those that they work with in coaching. It's an honor, a complete honor.
So, okay, let's hope that this episode then is going to be full of some of that permission to dream, some of that outside of the box thinking, and just a whole lot of inspiration from you and I both. Amanda, as I was preparing for today's conversation, I read over something that you wrote about nurse coaching, and you said, nurse coaching resuscitates life and allows individuals to live a thriving, vibrant, and fulfilled life that they're excited to wake up to each day. I agree with you. And that is one way that I would also describe nurse coaching, but that's a pretty big statement. So can you tell me a little bit more of what you mean by that, this idea that nurse coaching resuscitates life, and what has that maybe meant to you personally in your own nurse coaching journey?
Nurse coaching resuscitates life because all of a sudden, when you are sitting with a client in front of you, you are tapping into areas that they may have not either ever looked into or areas that have been shut off for a long time. And that has led them to being stifled in their life, to not achieving what it is. So as nurses, satisfying for status quo and not going higher than that and not looking for more. And I know that this took place in my own life as I was a nurse and a nurse leader, and seeing how I just got burnt out and I felt like there wasn't much left for me to give, that there wasn't much left in just life. I was questioning, is this all that there is? And then I experienced nurse coaching, going through the collective and learning what that is and learning what coaching is, and then learning to be a coach. And then how does it resuscitate life? I think the biggest example I can give, and I've shared it multiple times, but is with my daughter, and how it saved both our relationship and really saved her and saved our family, because we were willing to dive in and get dirty and messy and dig out the stuff that was stopping us And now we have a vibrant, thriving life that we all love to hang out. We all love to be together and are so just joyous. And that's just one example, but I've seen it over and over again. And I have clients where they come and they feel so stuck. Nurses feeling so stuck and like, this is it. And when you can utilize nurse coaching to bring in a different perspective, I love to just give, let's take a vantage point over here and see what life looks like if we look in that way. And let's look at it this way, see what happens. And then all of a sudden see the light come on in them and the light and the love. And then they come back session after session. I'm like, you are a totally different person. Their life is resuscitated at that point in time and they are living fully and vibrantly.
Yes, I love that. I love that language. One, because it's something that we can all resonates with us quite deeply as nurses, this idea of resuscitation, but also it really paints a picture of how deeply impactful the work that we get to do is, right? It's not just surface level. And Amanda, if we can dive a little bit deeper into what you shared about, these changing relationships and changing health inside of the dynamic of your family unit. How do you make sense of that happening? Because I know like when you chose to become a nurse coach, that wasn't your goal, right? You probably didn't join the program because you thought, oh, well, maybe this will help me have a better relationship with my daughter. But what was that evolution like and how do you kind of make sense of it all?
You're absolutely right. Like the reason I joined the collective was to make a difference in healthcare. Like I was a nurse leader and I was seeing where I couldn't make the changes that I wanted to make and there must be something more. That's why I entered. And as I was going through certification process, we just were having issues and many, many issues and some pretty traumatic things come up and we had tried everything and nothing was working. And so I believed in what I was doing, but like I was new, like I was a baby nurse coach and I didn't know. And so I knew my daughter was watching me, watching this dream that I had. And so I just looked at her and I said, hey, would you be interested in trying this? And she said, yes. I will never forget that day because we entered in. And while I was like, this is not at all, like, this is so out of my realm. I don't work with kids. So, like I'm a nurse leader. I'm an ER nurse. I'm a mom. And I love my kids, but I don't work with kids. So to take her in and coach her in that way and I think that when you bring up the words resuscitating, like that's what comes to mind because I watched it in front of me. I watched as all of a sudden as a coach, I could put mom outside of the door and I could be a coach. And the questions I asked her were all about her finding her power, her voice, her wisdom, and seeing how she wasn't making the right choices because she was trying to live to someone else's standard, her friend's standards, the school's standards, and fully giving her permission. What do you need? And then like all of a sudden she just lit up. And so when we come back session after session and all of a sudden she's like, it's working. And she was better. Her grades were better. Our relationships were better. Like that's what I talk about when I talk about resuscitating because it was nothing I did. She was making the choices to bring life back into her life when at the moment she didn't have it.
Yeah. Amanda, I have this very vivid memory of being on the graduation call with your collective when you were, as you said, just a teeny tiny baby nurse coach. And I remember you sharing this as like your biggest transformation was taking everything that you'd learned about nurse coaching and integrating it into your personal life, like with your family and your daughter saying yes to being one of your pro bono clients during the practicum and how that shifted everything. I remember sitting there just like full goosebumps, tears streaming down my face. I think I asked you to like tell the story again for the whole group because it was so, so powerful. And so, I mean, I'm so grateful for your willingness to share this personal story. And what I'm also hearing you say is that it's not unique to this one situation with you and your life and your daughter and her experience on the receiving end of coaching. Like you've also seen this play out again and again with your clients, with the nurses and nurse coaches that you have supported, and then the ripple effect that goes out to their families, their communities, the population, and from there on out. Is that right?
Yeah, it is 100% correct. And I would say like it takes one question just to open up a different perspective. And when I see it with students when I see it with nurse coaches and I just ask them one question to begin to unlock for them, and the things that they do, and they come back and report back to me. I mean, we don't always know, but when I do get the opportunity to find out, they're changing lives. So many lives are changed because they're taking that same thing. Like, I'm not totally sure what I'm doing here, but I'm going to step out in faith, trust the process, and see what happens. And then again, relationships stored, health restored, people taking bold action. I mean, I can think of one person who even created an own position in a nonprofit while she had just asked one question. And she was like, I believe so much in this and I'm still learning it. And she created her own position in a nonprofit organization while getting certified. It was pretty epic.
Well, that's nurse coaching right there, right? The power of one question and the power of being willing to be brave and be bold and ask that question and put yourself in front of, someone. Maybe it's the right person, maybe it's not, but be willing to put yourself out there and kind of take a stand for these things that you believe in and you're passionate about. Yes, Amanda, I love this. So, okay, I have to tell you that one of the things that has always inspired me really deeply about you is your drive and your desire to shake up the system and to get into the healthcare system and totally get your hands dirty and figure out how to make it better. And I'm curious, in a time when so many nurses are so burnt out, and you said you have been there as a nurse leader, we're so burnt out. So many nurses are thinking of or actually walking away from the profession or from the healthcare system. What keeps you passionate about making changes in the system? Why is that so important to you?
Going back to the core of why I became a nurse, and why I became a nurse is to care for people and to serve people from my heart. And from an early on nurse, serving people was what I had always wanted to do, but also serving fellow employees, fellow coworkers, because I saw that our system we just got tore down. The work that we were asked to do, the things that we were asked to do as nurses, that nurses are asked to do today are at times insurmountable. It's impossible for one person to do what they can do. But I know that a nurse can transform not only one person's life. If you go into a patient's room and you transform that person's life, you've transformed their family, maybe their community, and maybe so much more. And nurses are healers. And so I love that if we can get inside the system and we can shake it up and we can help nurses see their value, see their empowerment and their ownership of what it is that they do. Also, the ownership of their self, their own care, how that transpires to the lives that you affect as you work as a bedside nurse. I love helping nurses stay in their position, nurse coaches stay in their position and shake up that system. Because if your family member was laying in that bed, what nurse would you want to walk through that door to take care of your family member? And I would want someone to walk through that door that is passionate, kind, loving, caring for themselves, because I know that they will take even better care of my loved one if they're taking care of themselves first.
I would want someone to walk through that door who is a nurse coach. I mean, really, who has all of the technical trainings that they need to have to be the most epically skilled bedside nurse they can be, but also somebody who is trained with the tools, the techniques, the communication, the presence, the really love and human caring of a nurse coach. Yes, you are 100% right. And so I am so happy that someone like you, Amanda, is out here helping other nurses and nurse coaches really stay where they are, get embedded inside of the system. Because a lot of times when we talk about what's possible as a nurse coach, something that we hear many, many stories about, and we've had tons of interviews on the podcast so far, they happen to revolve around nurse coaches who work in private practice. And a lot of nurses do choose to go that route, and that is amazing. I myself am one of them, so that's very near and dear to my heart. But there are a lot of nurses and nurse coaches who have no interest in private practice, or maybe not yet, or, just simply not the direction that they want to go. But they don't really have an understanding of what else they can do, right? Of how they can integrate nurse coaching into their current position, or how to create creative about what else might be out there. But you know, because you've got eyes on it all, so you know that nurses are out there, right? Bringing nurse coaching into their organizations, creating roles, creating entire departments that are totally shaking things up. Talk to me a little bit about this. Like, make that real for me, because honestly, I truly believe that you know a whole lot more about what nurse coaches are doing in the organization, probably than even I do.
Yes. And I love this because there are so many people that go through certification and are like, what now? Like, I'm not wanting to step out and have my own practice. A lot of people do. And I think that sometimes we can get caught feeling that if I don't start my own private practice, then I'm not leaning in to what I just learned to be a nurse coach. I'm not living fully into everything that I just went through and gained through this whole certification process that I put so many hours into. And that's just not true, because I have seen nurse coaches work in organizations where I was just on a call with a nurse coach 2 days ago who was saying, I sat with my patient, I got 10 extra minutes. And because of my training as a nurse coach, just pausing and connecting with this patient for 10 minutes transformed his entire stay, his entire outcome and process. Because I knew how to be fully present from my training. I knew he's needing something and that human connection. And all it took was 10 minutes. I have seen nurses say, I talk to my patients differently. I shouldn't even say talk to my patients differently. I listen to my patients differently. And in listening, I realized that if I can deeply listen to my patient, I have more time. Even though it feels like slowing down takes more time and I'm rushed with everything I have to do. If I pause and I take 5 minutes and truly listen to my patient, they're not on the call light as much. They do better. Their outcomes are better. They get healthier faster, but they also hear like what you are helping them with as their recovery process. They hear that better and receive that better because they know that there's a connection when you slow down and have that. So I've seen that happen. And that's where I say you can mold nurse coaching as a bedside nurse and put it into your practice and transform the work that you do. I always say, set an intention to what you're going into your day. So if your intention is to listen more today and do that with all of your patients, it radically changes the outcome of your day and how your day went and how it flowed. I've also seen where people, take that brave step and say, can we do a mindfulness at our morning huddle? And I've had people begin to lead mindfulness sessions in their huddles and take lead on wellness seminars, to give talks to whether it's their department or their like healthcare days that they have, and begin to bring in concepts. So it's not even if you're bringing in the whole package of nurse coaching, you're bringing in the concepts and who we become, because nurse coaching isn't just a job. It's a person. It's who we become and how we live our lives. And you're bringing that into your organization. And all of a sudden, people are acting differently. Like they're responding differently because the vibe is different. The culture begins to shift. Things begin to change. And then the other thing that I've seen that I absolutely love is to mention it just in passing to your manager. And your manager say, we need something like that. And I cannot tell you how many times I've seen nurses get invited into create some form of nurse coaching starting in their department just by a conversation of, hey, this is what I'm doing. And it usually starts in the certification process. And they say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And I would love to talk to you more about it. And they either say, okay, when you're done, come back. Or they say, yeah, let's talk about this and see. And then they get more interested. And doors open that they never would have thought could be opened, but it all started with just that one conversation of, I believe in this. This is what I'm doing, and this can change our unit. This can change our organization. And it's powerful when you do that. It's just a conversation. It all starts with one conversation.
Amanda, I'm smiling as I hear you talk about this, because I think I know I did this myself when I first learned about nurse coaching and dove into this field. But nurses have a tendency when they discover nurse coaching to almost like keep it as this tiny little secret inside of ourselves. And there's a million reasons why this happens. For me, it was fear. It was fear of doing something outside of the box. It was fear of doing something different than nobody else on my unit in the ICU had ever heard of nurse coaching. And I told myself the story that they also would not be interested in nurse coaching. And they would have thought, oh, you're, still kind of a tiny baby novice nurse. What are you going to be doing getting into the health and wellness coaching side of things? Like, I just had so many fears and stories that I told myself. And I see this happen over and over again with nurses who come into the field, and they like, walk onto the unit, and maybe they have downtime and they're, doing some of their modules, but they're hiding their screen from other people. Like, we don't want to talk about it because we feel alone in nursing. We feel like I'm the only one here who thinks that the system is crazy and broken and that there's a better way to do things. So I'm going to do something about it, but I'm going to do it all on my own. And so why this makes me laugh is because over and over again, what we've seen is these nurses who go through the program and they're starting out keeping things quiet. Well, at some point, they do what you said. They end up having a conversation with their peers, with their coworkers. They drop it to their manager. Somebody inquires. And I can no longer count on my fingers and toes how many times we have had that one conversation you're talking about become that nurse leader, that nurse manager, that CNO turn around and say, what program are you in again? I want to become a nurse coach. I want to do what you're doing, because they see that light and they see something shifting within you. I want to see that shift happen within me, and I want to be a part of bringing that shift to the unit.
That's so true. And I don't know why we keep it in. Like you said, we keep it to ourselves. Some of it is vulnerability to say this is nursing in a different way, and because other people don't know about it, then is it a thing? Like, is it really, even though they're diving into it, right? Like, what can this be? What can this become? And so we keep it in. But then once all of a sudden, I hear this over and over again. People will say, you look different. You're acting different. You're showing up. What is it that's going on? Like, what has happened? And then that begins to open those doors. And I have seen, it's amazing, some of the things I've seen, but some of it is creating a self-care program, if you will, where like we spend one day a month, the hospital pays for this and a nurse coach leads it to do some sort of self-care activity. So whether that is drawing or candle making or yoga or whatever it is, they've done anything and everything because one person said yes and spoke up and said, I would like to bring this in here. And they're given a little bit of opportunity. And this is what I love to tell nurse coaches and my clients that I work with, is to say that one conversation opens the door a little bit. So while maybe you're not going in and trailblazing a complete nurse coaching package right off the bat, you're bringing in concepts of nurse coaching, and they want more and more and more and more. And that's how we get into the system. That's how we shake up the system and we transform it. The other thing that I have seen and that I love to talk about is that the transformation in our healthcare system now, it's radically different than when I graduated from the collective. There's been a huge shift. I graduated in COVID, and so it was very different. But this shift is coming to where they're going internally to create this shift. And so what I see is it's taking these nurse coaches standing up to say, hey, can I talk to you about this? This is something that's interested. And they bring them in, and that's where, so the nurse coaches create their positions, they create their departments, they create these places from the inside out, instead of the organization looking outward to bring in an outside company, an outside vendor, an outside person to come in and create that change. They want to do it within, and they want to do it within their people for a multitude of reasons. And that's where I say, if you get the invitation for one, like, run with that. Because if you keep going with that, I have seen where people have created their own position. And then they're like, oh, this position, oh, now we need 2. Oh, now we need 3. Now we need a whole department to go across all of our healthcare systems in this major healthcare system to create this. And it all started from one conversation.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more when it comes to the shift that we're seeing. I think, yes, from when you became a nurse coach, from when I became a nurse coach, things are so drastically different. And I don't want to use the word easier. I mean, I do, I guess, if I'm being truly honest, I do think it is a lot easier now as a nurse coach than it is half a decade ago when I first entered into this field. But easy is all relative, right? What is true is that there are so many more opportunities and there is so much more openness to this idea. And one, because nurse coaching is making a name for itself. We've got more of a reputation. There were only a few hundred nurse coaches back when I started. Now there are thousands and thousands. You know, we alone, the Nurse Coach Collective, have trained more nurse coaches than anyone else out there in the thousands. So like our army is building. I see us, you know, just like marching along the front lines. And who better to be inside of the system making these changes than us nurses who have always been in the system, always been their boots on the ground. And, you know, in a lot of ways have been over here saying like, hey, something needs to change. Like, who's ready to listen? And now, as you're saying, what you're seeing and feeling is that, like, be it out of finally having an awakening or just pure necessity, people are starting to listen inside of those organizations and say like, all right, I'm all ears. What are we doing to shift things? What are we doing to improve patient outcomes? What are we doing to improve nurse retention? What are we going to do to combat nurse burnout so that our nurses are happier, which translate to everything else functioning at the highest capacity inside of the hospital? So yes. And I think what's just coming up for me is wanting to take like a deep breath of honoring all of those nurses who are in the system and doing that work and making those proposals to be doing something differently. And honoring the higher ups who are saying yes, who are saying, yeah, let's do this. Let's try this out.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it for a multitude of reasons. And I do think the strongest catalyst for this is walking through the pandemic and coming out and recognizing like there was anything that was ever going to put at the forefront of not only healthcare, but of our country, that our healthcare system needs to change. It was the pandemic, because the change that needs to happen is the way that we treat and care for the healthcare givers is what needs to transform so that we have a strong, robust, thriving healthcare system for decades and centuries to come. But if a change doesn't begin to happen now, that will crumble. And COVID, as awful as it was, COVID put that at the forefront because of what healthcare had to endure as we went through that. So now, and I think what happened is it wasn't just the frontline staff. For one of the probably first times ever, it wasn't just the frontline staff experiencing it. It was felt throughout an entire organization. So think prior COVID, we can talk about short staffing. We can talk about the ratios. We can talk about all this stuff that makes nursing hard. But the leaders, the top leaders in the organizations who aren't boots on the ground, facing this day to day and feeling it and working it, don't understand. But all of a sudden you put yourself in the middle of a pandemic and your staff is crumbling, your organization is crumbling. Like massive shifts are having to happen just so we can take care of our patients, even routine care. Like don't even talk about the pandemic or the COVID patients, but even just how do we take care of patients is totally different. And I can think, you know, as a leader in the hospital at that time, the leaders coming in on Saturday and Sunday, like running out of supplies and like, what are we doing? Like we have to come out and them seeing, they're now called out of their offices. The CNO at one of the places I worked part-time at, she would come in on Saturday and Sunday and work because we didn't have any more people. We didn't have any more space. So they experienced that. It became real to them. That's why I believe they're open to organizations are getting open, because they have felt the burnout. Even if it's not to the extent as frontline staff, they have felt it. And now we need to see this and we need to change this because of what we're feeling. I can only imagine what our frontline staff are feeling and seeing.
So silver lining to everything that all of us, especially nurses, have been through in the last 3 years is that now the broader public and also the higher ups in the healthcare system are able to see and feel deeply what we nurses on the ground have kind of been feeling and saying all along, right? It's not that entirely new problems and challenges were created. It's just that the existing problems and challenges were so magnified that now they are apparent, and now there's no choice but to do things differently and to be open to trying new things. So, Amanda, I want to go back a little bit to recap what you were sharing before, and then we can build on it together, which is, so when we're talking about doing things differently and doing things differently inside of the system, I want to make it really clear for our nurses and our nurse coaches who are listening, like what are we really talking about? Like when you take nurse coaching and you bring it into the system or bring it where you are, what actually are our options there? So the one thing that you talked about is when you let nurse coaching infuse into your being and who you are, that's going to change how you show up, how you hold space, how you're present, how you listen, how you slow down in the moment to actually be far more effective, and all of the positive benefits that's going to have for the nurse, the patients, the outcomes on the whole. And that part is really like integrating nurse coaching to your role at the bedside is how you shared about it. But I think it doesn't really matter where you are. You could be in leadership, you could be in management, like integrating nurse coaching exactly where you are. I myself was totally surprised by this because when I became a nurse coach, I knew to my core that I wanted desperately to get out of the ICU and I didn't want to do bedside anymore. However, when I became a nurse coach, my biggest surprise was that it was that last year I spent in the hospital was my favorite. I fell in love with being a bedside nurse. I still chose to transition out of it, but it was because I experienced it through the new lens of a nurse coach. So I totally feel what you're saying there of bringing that to the bedside. And I also know that there are a lot of nurses who really do come into nurse coaching because they just don't want to do what they've been doing. They don't want to do any more stuff at the bedside. Maybe they don't want to do any more leadership or management, but they still want to serve the system in some way. So what else is possible aside from just integrating it into the role that you are in right now? What else are you seeing nurse coaches doing, either through just broad kind of descriptions or through stories of nurse coaches that you've seen? Like what else are you seeing happen at the system level?
I am seeing nurse coaches where they see a gap in the system, where they see that if we could do coaching here, this whole area would radically change. So I've seen them step into talking to, again, having a conversation, talking to leadership. And leadership, this is what's blown my mind. I've seen leadership come and walk side by side with a nurse coach. And I've seen the nurse coaches get super nervous about this, but you walk side by side and you discover together. So what we talk about in nurse coaching, we talk about co-creating. I've seen leadership and a nurse who's been trained in nurse coaching, willing to be vulnerable and put themselves out there and take some messy action, set up meetings, and meeting after meeting, set up programs, set up areas to bring in nurse coaching. So I'm thinking of a person who I have worked with who is like cancer is near and dear to her heart. And when she was finally able to heed that call and working with cancer patients, instead of leaving, like all of a sudden it's, let's create this together. And like the ball just started rolling and people were saying, yes, yes, yeah. And this is where I say the doors just open up. And so what was unique about that is that's about patients. So that's not about caring for staff. That's about how can I bring in and create a position so I can care for patients. I can care for cancer patients and what they're going through and create a different outcome for them. Help them see what life is like post-diagnosis, right? So create that. I've seen them where you say yes and you create, again, it's never clear in the beginning. You have to take just that next right action step. And you begin to develop that. And I've seen where people have begun to take their role and transition it from solely a bedside nurse into being the nurse coach on their unit. And it started out with, let's do 4 hours, then let's do 8 hours of your time. And then into over a 6-month period, your whole job has transitioned from bedside on the unit to nurse coach on the unit. And I'm so that person's meeting with staff, developing what I would say like a crisis sort of role. So where if, there's a code or there's something traumatic that happens, a coach responds and takes that nurse aside and helps them process. I think of the times I've had traumatic codes, and if somebody was there to help me process instead of just move on to the next patient, my life and my career as a nurse would have been drastically different.
I probably wouldn't have been so desperate to leave the ICU had I ever had, an ounce of support or a moment to debrief or a nurse coach there to simply hold space and listen. Absolutely.
And one of the big things, like this is a really big area that and I feel most organizations are open to this in some shape or form, but is to come in and pair with new staff. So whether that's a brand new grad nurse or it's a new staff to the organization, pair with them. A nurse, a new grad, let's pair with them for a year and support them through transitioning into a nurse on the floor for a year. If it's new staff, for 6 months, so they learn to navigate the system, they learn to see who it is, and they get their resources, then they get the support that they need. Because how many times do we have something tragic happen, or a difficult patient, and by difficult or sick patient, something happen, and we don't know where to go with that in our first 6 months of employment. And then you begin to all of a sudden, I don't like this job. And so then you start job hunting because you have these bad feelings. And I've seen where nurse coaches have stepped into that and have increased retention because all of a sudden the nurses feel connected and cared for in a system that they didn't before. It's really like so much that I've seen nurses do and bring in to organizations and develop these programs because who knows better what a nurse needs than another nurse?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's like that is it. So okay. So we have the ability to integrate nurse coaching at the bedside. We have the ability to create some kind of a program inside of the department, be that working with fellow nurses, be that working with other staff on the healthcare team, or working with patients, right? The example you described about working with the oncology population. We have nurses in our community who have made huge proposals inside of their organizations. Like I'm talking massive proposals that are up there at the highest leadership level inside of hospitals that we've seen approved. And whether that's working with nurses or whether that's working with physicians or whether that's working with patients, it's beginning to feel more and more to me like nothing is off the table when it comes to what you were saying, like tuning into what you're passionate about. When you can figure out what you're passionate about, who are the people that you want to serve, what's the gap that you want to fill, and then go start having conversations with the higher ups. Who do you need to talk to be getting that ball rolling? And it all starts with, well, I think we kind of touched on it. I think it all starts with one question, one conversation, putting these things out there. At the same time, Amanda, I know that stepping into a leader's office and making a proposal is not easy. It would be terrifying for me, I know. So I imagine for many. What tips, what advice, what words of wisdom do you have for a nurse coach who is interested in shaking things up, making a proposal, changing the department? What wisdom can you impart?
There's a couple of things, but first we need to recognize that it's just a conversation. And this comes up so many times when I am coaching clients around these conversations and talking to a leader and coaching them around that, and them even beginning to think like they think that way. I'm like, they're human, just like you and I. So what I always like to tell people is remove the hierarchy. As best you can, remove the hierarchy that is there, because all you're doing is having a conversation with another person. You're bringing in your medicine, something they don't know anything about, but they are interested in. And you are bringing your medicine into that, and just share it. Share all of you and who you are, and really approach it like it is a coaching conversation. I always say you are there to support them. It is not about you, and it is not about, while you're bringing in this program, it's not necessarily about what you're bringing in, but it's how can you support them? So you, just like we do in our coaching conversations, wanting to get to know about them. Like, we know as bedside nurses, what we think or what we know our trials or our difficulties are. But until you've walked in someone's shoes, you don't know what theirs are. So do we know what a CEO's trials are, or what they're having as their greatest challenges? Do we know what a CNO is? So elicit that from them, get that from them. And in that moment, that's an opportunity. You don't take a full 30, 60-minute conversation to coach them, but how can you support them when you're asking them, hey, what's your biggest challenge? What happens if that doesn't change in the next year? What happens to this organization? What happens to your position if this doesn't change in the next year? And so it's really just a conversation, and you are there to bring, again, your medicine. So ask them questions just like you would in coaching, and speak to how nurse coaching can help them with that and what that would potentially look like.
It's funny, I'm hearing you talk and I'm realizing that I'm having so much fun and I'm so comfortable sitting here talking to you, and you are someone who I would have been nervous to walk into your office. I would have been afraid to walk into you as a, nurse leader, more experienced, more higher up on the hierarchy than I was at the time. I would have been fearful to walk in and talk to you about nurse coaching. And yet here you are reminding me in this moment, we're all humans. We're all struggling with something. We all have challenges in some way. And so to meet another human where they're at, and to bring in all that you are as a nurse coach, to listen, to ask questions, to have the goal of co-creating something that is going to be in greatest service of both of you and the organization as a whole. What a beautiful perspective, really. What a beautiful perspective. And it almost breaks down this big scary thing into something that feels totally natural and human and just a conversation, as you said, Amanda.
Yeah. It's just a conversation. I think of a client who did this, and while working and coaching up to this moment, when this client walked into the office of the CFO, the CEO, and the CNO, she's like, I'm just going to be me. I'm just going to be who I am and take it or leave it. And that's what I also say, we talk in Nurse Coach all the time about being unattached to the outcome. When you are unattached to the outcome, there is so much power in that. And that's what you're bringing in to show them, take it or leave it. I have something that will serve you and your organization, serve it powerfully. If you don't want it, it allows you to show up in a different way where all of a sudden they're like, I need that. One, and it could be one, who does that person think they are coming in to be like, hey, you need me? One of my favorite quotes is from one of my clients who was like, you need me in your organization. You need me to change healthcare in your organization. And he was like, I think we need to have a conversation and to step in and do that. And so that's the boldness that it takes, right? But it really, when you can do that, we all are humans, and we all have challenges and trials that we're going through. And when we can meet you at that place and hear you and receive you and really allow you to be felt in that moment, that's when they're like, I need this. Whatever this person has, whatever they're saying, I need it. Let's sign up right now.
Amanda, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for imparting all of this wisdom. And really, thank you for being here in this moment with me as yourself, showing up as exactly who you are so that we get to share this with our community. Is there anything else on your mind, in your heart, that you want to leave here before we wrap things up?
I just want to say to live each day to your fullest. If you have a dream, go after it. The world needs you as you are, and whatever you are stepping into as a nurse coach, you can achieve it.
Well, let's take a deep breath and allow our listeners to really soak that in and receive it. Amanda, thank you so much for being here with me in the virtual realm. I am already getting stoked for next year to get to hang out with you in person at the 2024 Nurse Coach Conference. So Fellow nurses, nurse coaches, if you want to come hang out with us there, we will continue to post the link for the conference in the show notes, as well as how you can learn more about Amanda and her amazing practice. Thanks so much for joining us. See you next time.